Happening now, tweet revenge. President Trump unleashes an online storm with a new attack on the NFL and assailing the father of the UCLA basketball players released by China. Will the president get the gratitude that he is demanding? Fixing background checks. The Justice Department orders a review of the database that houses the country's gun background checks following a mass shooting by an ex-convict who should not have been allowed to buy his weapon. Why did the system fail? Search and rescue, a desperate effort to find more survivors from a U.S. Navy plane that went down off the coast of Japan. It is the latest in a series of serious and deadly accidents plaguing the Navy. Are America's ships and aircraft in the region prepared to face the North Korean threat? And ethical challenge. A top Trump aide is accused of breaking rules that bar White House workers from taking part in political campaigns while on the job. Did Kellyanne Conway's comments about the Alabama Senate race violate the Hatch Act? We want to welcome our viewers in the United States and around the world. Wolf Blitzer is off today. I'm Jim Sciutto, and you're in the Situation Room. Well, while many Americans are talking turkey on this Thanksgiving Eve, President Trump is turning to Twitter to vent his anger and his outrage. In a series of tweets from his Mar-a-Lago resort in Florida, the president lashed out at LeVar Ball, the father of a UCLA basketball player who was detained for shoplifting in China. Mr. Trump is apparently incensed by Ball's failure to thank the president for his role in his son's release, calling him, quote, an ungrateful fool and a poor man's version of Don King, but without the hair. There's also breaking news coming in. CNN has learned that the ATF and the FBI are being ordered by the Justice Department to carry out a comprehensive review of the national database that houses gun background checks. Attorney General Jeff Sessions says it is in response to the church massacre in Sutherland Springs, Texas. It was carried out by a former Air Force serviceman whose conviction for domestic abuse was not properly reported, making it possible for him to buy the gun that he used in that shooting. And White House counselor Kellyanne Conway is facing an ethics complaint tonight. She is accused by the former director of the Office of Government Ethics of violating the Hatch Act, which bars most White House workers from actively taking part in political campaigns while on the job. During a TV News interview, Conway said that Senate candidate Roy Moore's Democratic rival wants to raise taxes and is weak on crime and borders. We're covering all of that and more this hour with our guests, including Congressman John Garamendi of the Armed Services Committee, our correspondents and specialists also standing by tonight. Let's begin, though, with the president's Thanksgiving Eve Twitter tirade. CNN senior White House correspondent Jeff Zeleny is in Florida with the president. Jeff, we have seen tweet storms like these from Mr. Trump before when he's visited his Mar-a-Lago resort, but this one this morning particularly angry.
Indeed we have, Jim, and it's dinner hour now at Mar-a-Lago, but this Twitter storm started early today, in fact before sunrise, with the president setting the tone for the day here, reviving many old grievances here on Twitter. In a series, in a week of thankfulness when presidents often have given thanks, this morning the president did anything but. President Trump back at Mar-a-Lago for the first time since April. His Thanksgiving break opening another season at his private club in Palm Beach, even though he went to great lengths to suggest he's not on vacation. We'll be having meetings and working the phones from the Windsor White House in Florida, the president tweeted just after sunrise. But as Republicans measured fallout from his embrace of controversial Alabama Senate candidate Roy Moore, the president hit the links today, following an early morning burst of tweets starting at 5:25 a.m. He added new fuel to the fight with LeVar Ball, the father of one of the UCLA basketball players jailed in China after allegedly stealing sunglasses. Ball blasted Trump earlier this week to CNN's Chris Cuomo.
Tell Donald Trump to have a great Thanksgiving.
The president still fuming over not receiving more thanks for securing their release. It wasn't the White House, it wasn't the State Department, it wasn't Father Laval's so-called people on the ground in China that got his son out of a long-term prison sentence. It was me. Too bad. LeVar is just a poor man's version of Don King, but without the hair. Don King supported President Trump in 2016. The president went on to call Ball an ungrateful fool. In a season of thankfulness, it was a blistering response to Ball's refusal to say the words thank you to President Trump.
If I was going to thank somebody, I'd probably thank President Z.
The president didn't stop there, also reviving his beef with the NFL. The NFL is now thinking about a new idea, keeping teams in the locker room during the national anthem next season. That's almost as bad as kneeling. The tweet storm didn't stop until the president arrived at Trump International Golf Course.
Yeah, I'll be talking.
The messages may have been an attempt to change the subject from his remarks Tuesday at the White House.
Let me just tell you, Roy Moore denies it. That's all I can say. He denies it. And by the way, he totally denies it.
Even as a majority of Americans say Moore shouldn't serve. Tonight, a new Quinnipiac poll shows 60% of American voters say if Moore is elected, the Senate should vote to expel him. 28% do not. But in Alabama, Moore's campaign touted the move, sending a copy of Mr. Trump's kind words to supporters. Florida Congressman Francis Rooney told CNN's Jim Sciutto he was among the Republicans who would not be following the president's lead and backing Moore.
Well, it's up to the president to decide what he wants to do, but I would have rather just seen no support for Roy Moore myself.
Right.
Now, as for the president's meetings and phone calls, White House aides here in Florida did not respond to our request for comment who the president called or who he met with. We do know that he spent about 5 hours or so at the Trump International Golf Course. Now, all of this is routine. We've covered several presidents for, several administrations. They do indeed take vacation the day before Thanksgiving, but President Trump does not want to ever acknowledge he, in fact, is on vacation. Now, as for the Roy Moore situation, we learned late today the RNC, the Republican National Committee, and the Republican Senatorial Committee that are oversee all these races, they are not changing their stance on putting money back into the race. Last week, they decided to pull money from the Alabama Senate race, and I'm told today by officials there, they're not going to revisit that decision despite the president's tight embrace of Roy Moore. Jim?
Jeff Zeleny traveling with the president in Florida. Thanks very much. Tonight, the longest-serving member of the House of Representatives is facing a call to step down from his post as the top Democrat on the Judiciary Committee and other calls to resign from Congress as a whole. John Conyers of Michigan, now the subject of an ethics investigation after allegations of sexual harassment. CNN congressional correspondent Sunlen Serfati is here with more. So Sunlen, Conyers says he's done nothing wrong, but he does admit to paying this settlement to at least one accuser.
That's right, he does, and he certainly is facing some new pressure tonight, Jim, and that is coming from members of his own party. Just in the last few hours, Congresswoman Kathleen Rice becoming the very first to call for his resignation. She says tonight in a statement, quote, Representative John Conyers should resign. I've reviewed the allegations against him, and they're as credible as they are repulsive, whether it happened 40 years ago or last week, settlement or no settlement, Democrat or Republican. Harassment is harassment. Assault is assault. We all know credible allegations when we hear them, and the same is true of hypocrisy. And add to that, earlier today, we also heard from Congressman Meeks, another fellow Democrat, calling for Conyers to give up his post on the Judiciary Committee.
I really think probably the appropriate thing right now is he should step down as the ranking member of the Judiciary Committee and be subject to this ethics investigation. So it can be determined whether or not there's a practice or pattern, and then appropriate consideration should be made at that time, as soon as the Ethics Committee finishes its review.
Meantime, also significant, the Detroit Free Press editorial page today calling for him to resign. That's his hometown newspaper, not waiting for the results of the ethics investigation. They say, quote, John Conyers Jr. must go after 53 years in Congress, after a stellar career of fighting for equality, after contributing so much to Southeast Michigan and the nation. It's a tragic end to his public career, but it's the appropriate consequence for the stunning subterfuge his office has indulged here, and a needed warning to other members of Congress that this can never be tolerated. And in that editorial, they specifically mentioned the payment that he admitted to making to the accuser, which came out of significantly his budget, out of his office. That's outside the way this is typically paid out of the settlement fund set up within the Treasury Department. And they say, as you asked, Jim, in this editorial, they allude to that they believe that was intended to bury this story.